how do we still improve? How do we feel like we're improving? How do we, just what can we do to adjust? Improving cardio, flexibility, improving your diet.
You wonder why he's so good. Those are so important, and you don't need to leave your house to do that.
It's all about technique. It's all about discipline. The whole point of jiu-jitsu is being able to adapt.
In this episode, we're still trying to figure out how to talk about the comparison. But in my opinion, I'm going to start by sharing a little bit of like my perspective on this particular topic, which is that I'm a big believer that martial arts doesn't really have to be bound by a dojo or a gym or anything like that. Another thing that I find is that martial artists are everywhere, but not everyone's a martial artist, including people that train jiu-jitsu, right? And when I met you first, when you came into the gym, you were really talking on some deep topics, right? We just literally, I would say Daniel came into one of our classes, which was a promotion ceremony. And then right off the bat, I'm talking some deep shit, love and then training and what it takes to get to next level. So you're able to like jump in and get it into that insight. And that's not an everyday occurrence, but I'm sure there were some things that like rang true to you right off the bat when I was saying stuff like that, right? Some like typical martial arts topics, right? But in my opinion, and when I've been the student and I've talked to my coaches from my past, it was all about martial arts, and they didn't really. To them, it was very strict. Like martial artists are people who do martial arts. Martial arts is like it's like judo and jiu-jitsu and all this other stuff. But it's weird when I know in my personal feeling, when I hear someone that did something incredible that I know takes a lot of work, for instance, you're a lawyer, that's a lot of work. You're a doctor, that's residency, picking your like what part in the medical field you want to like delve into, all this stuff. You are a chef with formal like training. When I heard that, I was like, oh, this guy's a martial artist. He's got the mindset, and I know that he went through something deep that requires a lot of attention and discipline, which to me is martial arts, bro. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, for sure.
And so when I met you, I was like, damn, I want to know. First of all, I want to know your perspective on things. I want to know how you see jiu-jitsu, how that jiu-jitsu can help not only you, but through that process, how can it help other people? I wanted to learn more about what attracted you to cooking, and then the connections between the two. You know what I'm saying? So the first thing I would like to learn, Daniel, is what is it about jiu-jitsu? How did you first find out about jiu-jitsu? And then as you started researching jiu-jitsu, what was the steps, maybe physically or mentally, that got you to the point of stepping your foot on the mats and then like really being excited about training?
Yeah, it's definitely a sort of a drawn out answer, I would say, but I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. When I first learned about jiu-jitsu, so I'm an avid podcast listener. I listen to Jocko podcast quite a bit. Probably there's a lot of listeners out there that have heard of it. And a lot of the discussion that they do has jiu-jitsu laced into it. So that right off the bat sort of put the idea in my head that, oh, jiu-jitsu is actually considered and regarded as one of, if not the top martial arts form to learn today. There's so many other aspects to it that I think translate into your everyday life, but without getting too in the weeds here, my introduction into jiu-jitsu was really first and foremost finding the right school. I think that was probably the number one first step in my head, and it was very similar with finding a culinary school as well when I first went. But
interesting.
I knew I was looking for something that was small, that there was going to be sort of that family feel to it, which Baem certainly has given me. I think for the most part that was the main criteria. Of course, I wanted to make sure I was getting taught the right way and
Yeah.
getting taught by somebody that really knew what they were talking about. So that was step number one. And once I found the school, I just, kind of had to take that next step myself. And that was the same thing with my first kitchen job. My first introduction into culinary school was, there's this almost sense of really nervous butterflies in your stomach, where you don't know what's going to happen. You know that you want to pursue this thing or whatever it is, but you run the risk of scrutiny for being bad at it, especially right when you're starting out with anything you do. You run that risk. So it's just a matter of whether or not, you find it worth it enough to make that leap. And that's kind of what I did. I showed up for my first class, and, to me, it was a total roller coaster, because I was not used to, the physical demand as well as the mental demand to get through it. I remember, I'm sure you remember this too. Like, I was giving 110% strength effort when I was first sparring, because I didn't want to suck. I didn't want to look like an idiot. But I could only make it through that first class because I just was so gassed, completely gassed. So I think, back to the original point, like, the biggest lesson I took out of sort of going from idea or desire to want to learn something to actually going and doing it and being consistent with it was that first you need to find the right teacher and the right environment to learn. And the next is to just do it. Don't think about it too much. Get out of your own head. Just go do it.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, because like you talked about the reasons why you want to get into jiu-jitsu. And for me, it, when I first started, I started when I was like 14, something like that. And I was in an environment where I was getting a lot of fights, and I was attracted to jiu-jitsu because at a base level, after enough fights, you start to realize like taking someone to the floor and hitting them there versus standing on your feet and hitting them there, there's a big difference, right? So experience taught me. I was really young, so I wasn't a master in anything. Like I was skateboarding a lot, but no, there was no mentorship, there was no guidance, there was no discipline. It was 100% for fun. When I saw jiu-jitsu, I didn't even see fun. What I saw was like a skill. I wanted to learn this skill, right? And it was the want for the skill was based out of a result of me getting beat up a lot. Like I would fight for fun, and I would fight because I had to, and I just learned I need to learn how to fight. And so what attracted me to jiu-jitsu was that. But as time went on and as proficiency went on, my wants changed. This will happen like for everyone, right? I would say I'll ask any brown belt, why did you want to join? And then ask them right now, like, why are you continuing? Different. It's going to be completely different, right? So
for sure,
to hear your initial, so that will change for you over time, and as it should, because as you get really good, you're going to change the things that you want. But here's the thing. I hear your wants, and it sounds like there's something deeper in there, right? So I'm not too sure about that with you in particular, because if it's discipline, or it's not just discipline, it's not just learning the skill. There's something that gets unlocked personally through jiu-jitsu that you're looking for. So I wanted to learn. Can you speak more about that? What was it about jiu-jitsu that you thought, I can unlock some potential, or there can be growth in these areas via this?
Yeah, that I like this question a lot, and here's why. Is because this directly translates into sort of what I want to get out of life in general, and what I find mentally and physically stimulating. So if you think about jiu-jitsu, one, I think that the art itself of grappling at its nature, to me, is the most appealing, just because at least when I first started, was because I felt like my body type was well suited for it, which I'm not sure if that's necessarily like that's a whole nother conversation. I feel like,
Right.
like I've seen guys half my size just twist me in pretzels. So I don't really think anymore body type has much to do with it, but that was my initial thought when I before I really started actually training. But going back to your question, what am I looking to get out of it? And the parallel that I draw is if I train myself in a specific discipline that requires me to pay attention to my surroundings, think multiple steps ahead, and really think clearly under pressure. Those are some essential skills that I've found always are rewarding when you nurture them over the years. And cooking is the same way.
Yeah, I was about to say, you just pointed out 3 things that I know maybe like they're even explicit about this is what you need to work on, in a cooking environment, right? Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I think it's just so valuable too. Like even outside of those 3 core pillars, how that translates into your everyday life. So when you're at work, for example, your professional life, you'll get a lot further if you can think under pressure, if you can think several steps ahead. I mean, those are some key elements to business in itself. Mm-hmm. I just think they're such valuable things to practice in life. Whatever the actual discipline or art is behind them, those elements are critical skills to success in life.
That's crazy because I just had this image, right? So like you've identified like 3 different things that sort of motivated you to pursue. Like, I want these things, but how do I do it? And then you've identified jiu-jitsu. But what's interesting is that you went through you have a culinary background, so like you have like a proper cooking training like coming up. You've worked in various like kitchens, types of kitchens even. And what's the most interesting part is you're not a cook currently. You transitioned to tech. And what's awesome about that is that you continue to use what you learned in this life and pushed it forward into this life to make you excel. But at the same time, I'm sure the current career that you're in, it's pushing you in various ways, including the ways that you just talked about that you learned through cooking. But you actually now are pursuing that growth, continued growth in those areas through jiu-jitsu. So these very important ideas and goals that you identified as good, and now and it has helped you, currently helping you, and then now you're trying to build upon it, further build upon that. You know what I mean? And this is what I mean by there's martial artists everywhere, dude. Like, you go from one thing to another, but the lessons continue. That's martial arts. Like, at the base level, people have asked me, what is a martial artist? Like, aren't we all just martial artists? We're training martial arts. It's like, that's not true. If you learn a lesson on the mat and you forget that lesson when you step off the mat, you're not a martial artist, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. I think it's really simple. And so if you can learn something and then parlay that to other areas of your life, and you're relying on that as a benefit, like you've earned this tool and then you're going to go use that tool now. If that's the case, that's martial arts thinking, because there's so many people that learn something and then they compartmentalize it, or there's undeniable things that you've learned that you move through the next phases of your life. But I'm a big believer that the reason why these lessons are obvious or not obvious is because we're not being conscious about them. If we focus on being conscious about these lessons, then we can soak up as much as we can and actually try to use all that stuff that we learned. You know what I mean? So
100%.
Yeah. So it's really cool to hear the way you're approaching jiu-jitsu, but really it's a statement about how you're approaching like your life in general.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that when I first started cooking, I had a similar sort of feeling initially. I knew I was interested in doing this thing. I cooked at home. My mom taught me cooking when I was growing up, just very, very basic stuff. She cooked something different every night. We didn't do takeout really. It was her cooking. And we sat down for a family meal and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely had interest in that specifically, but going into cooking itself, the actual art and profession behind it. I still remember my first kitchen job when I first got the job. My first day going into the kitchen, my mindset was very similar to my first day walking into your studio, which was, you know, I don't know what to expect. I'm nervous. I'm excited. And I'm just going to learn. I'm going to soak up as much as possible because, you know, the shit is like crack for me. I love it. It's totally stimulating mentally. I'm learning a new skill. And over the years, one of the things that I'm also drawing a direct parallel to is that, I thought I was, you know, getting to the point where I was really skilled and then somebody else comes in, you know, somebody that's more experienced comes in and just makes me look like an idiot.
Wow.
And corrects numbers of different things that I'm doing wrong. And this is early on too. And it was totally humbling because here I am thinking that I'm hot shit because I've learned all these new great skills, but I had barely scratched the surface. And that's to me, that's where it really was like, okay, it's on. I'm going to get as good as I possibly can. And I'm going to get better and better and better, not just in refining my knowledge and my general skill level, but having it become instinct.
It's so crazy, dude. Like, you know, this whole idea, I've never really shared or developed my perspective on what martial arts is. You know, the whole thing is like, it's not bound by anything. And then what you just said is so, every jiu-jitsu person listening to this podcast would be like, oh my God, that happened in jiu-jitsu. That happened countless times, right? Like jiu-jitsu is really weird because one of the things that you learn early and will continue to battle is your own ego. And when it comes to your own ego, you think, yeah, I'm badass. Like I should get that blue belt, man. I should get that blue belt. I've been doing this for so long. You know, name someone on the mat that like gives me a hard time. Like let's do it. Like I'm ready for that next belt. And it's like, that attitude right there is the reason why you probably aren't blue belt yet. You know what I mean? Like you got to realize that you really don't know shit. And then the second you sort of employ that idea of I know shit, just that mentality, you're already doing yourself a disservice because number one, you have no idea how big this is. Number two, you're not realizing there's someone walking on the street right now that would run circles around you regarding cooking, regarding understanding of food. Like, you know, in jiu-jitsu, it's like the depth of knowledge, the timing, tricks, you know, stuff like that. It goes multi dimensions. And in cooking too, it's like, you know, a story is like I have like buddies that like to cook, and I'll ask them because my story with cooking is my parents worked all the time. I was home alone with my brother playing PlayStation, and I'm sitting and watching Food Network since I was a little kid. You know, my mom cooked at home cooking every day, but that was some ethnic shit. That was some Korean stuff. I was like, yo, what's this like casserole? What the hell's that? You know what I mean? So it was constantly like learning shit, you know, like learning. And then there was this other component where like I didn't feel like an American because to me, an American is a person that just, I don't know, like isn't eating smelly foods and stuff like that. You know, like you're a little kid, you don't know what's going on. So cooking to me was this central component of American culture that I wanted to learn more about. And then I loved food. And so it was this combination, right? And so like food is really, really important to me, and cooking, this is how I know that there's a definite connection. You know what I'm saying? So this is really cool to hear. Like this, when it comes to realizing that there's levels to this shit is a whole nother thing. Like I was saying, my buddies knows how to cook. They like to cook. What they're really doing, what I realize is we're just copying recipes. We don't really know the theory and the concept of how this roux even can be velvety or this roux's being clumpy, or you know what I mean? And so yeah, like it's the same thing in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that certainly certainly is a good point regarding the need for some sort of formal education from somebody that actually does know what they're doing. And I say this because, to anyone out there, going back to your point, that is sort of questioning, why did I get to this blue belt or this purple belt? I'm definitely capable of being at that level, but at the same time, sort of the thought of, oh, I don't know shit, and I'm going to look to people that do to give me feedback. It goes both ways too, because once you get to that level and you look backwards, you immediately can say, oh, that's why I didn't get the purple belt or the blue belt. And that's, that was the one thing that I did when I was training other cooks. Was I remember, when I had gotten to a pretty solid level of cooking and sort of theory mixed with technique, there were definitely times where I'd have young cooks coming in and thinking that they were hot shit, and I'd come in and then correct them and say, hey, you could do this differently, or you can do that differently. Here's a better way to do it. Some of them would accept the feedback and actually make that change. And a couple of them actually still close friends with today, because that's, people that accept feedback, I find are, at least gracefully and humbly, are definitely worth holding on to. But there were guys who would come in and not appreciate feedback, and their ego would get in the way, and it would get in their way in terms of progressing to the next level, because they couldn't accept feedback humbly. I think that's really important that's an important distinction to make. It doesn't just go, looking forward to higher ranks, but when you get to that higher rank, it's about remembering the perspective of where you were. So I'm not like, do you have any memories of being a white belt and like thinking about a certain way?
Oh my
that
God.
kind of perspective?
Dude, another banger, bro. Like it's awesome to hear this, because so everyone knows, like, Daniel is, I would say you have a handful, maybe you had a couple weeks before the shutdown, right, of jiu-jitsu. Is that right?
Like 6 to 8.
Okay.
I think it was a couple of months.
Damn, that's okay. Good. So it's fairly new in the grand scheme of things with mat experience, but the lessons that we learned through the mat, Daniel already has. Like what you just said about having to make sure realizing it's a two-way street and approaching it in a particular way, and this goes for both people on both sides of that street. You know what I mean? It's so true in jiu-jitsu. Like, one of the things that I realized early is that a lot of coaches forget that they also, not only were they a white belt, but they also had a first day of jiu-jitsu. Like, I don't know why so many coaches, and you might be able to say this with famous chefs or whatever that you've met in your life, but like, there are guys who are in a leadership position, in a position where people are looking up at them, but they forget that they are exactly the same as the person that's walking into that there for the first time, right? And so that it's a combination of, like you said, it's a two-way street. If you don't have that humility on both sides, you're not going to grow, or you will grow, but it'll be extremely impeded. And this is why, like, grace and ego and all that all have a play into this. And you know what's funny? If you start jiu-jitsu at 14 like I did, that, and you're going to learn that quickly because you're going to get smashed. But at the same time, you're smashing other people, so it takes a while. You're getting the lesson, but unless you're conscious of it, it won't really come into your head until way later in the game. But what's so cool is, like I said, you are a martial artist by having that concept already. You know what I mean? Like, that's amazing.
Yeah. One other kind of thought that came to my mind too is that if you go through the process of mastering some kind of art just once, the lessons that you learn about the process behind mastering something are also totally translatable. So that's why I'm able to come into jiu-jitsu with almost an arty, humble perspective. Like, I suck, and the only way to get better is to be consistent, keep showing up every day. Even like, don't think about the ranks, don't think about the belts, think about remembering where I was on day one, and every day, as long as I come out of that gym better than I was the last time I was there, and I had learned something, that's a win. That's totally a win. Even if I get my ass kicked, which is going to happen plenty of times in my jiu-jitsu journey, especially, you know, in the near future as a white belt. Like I've accepted that. That is what it is.
Yeah.
But the process of learning itself and knowing that I'm honing in on the skill of learning how to think under pressure. I'm honing the skill of thinking several steps ahead.
Mm.
You know, those are critical life skills.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting to hear that. And, you know, I think the most difficult thing for people, so I think about the people listening to this, and I'm trying to introduce a concept that things are tied closer than you realize. It's just you have to think about it that way, or else you won't see it. People that a lot of people are masters of something, they just don't see themselves as a master of something because they haven't thought about it that way. You know what I mean? Like there was when I was in elementary school, there was this old timer on the crosswalk with the vest, and he had a stop sign. You know, he helped walk kids, right? He did that every fucking day, right? And
Yeah.
is that a deep skill? It's like, it doesn't need to be deep of a skill to still learn, you know, certain things. Like, oh, when a car approaches at this speed, he just sees it, like, okay, let me just make sure I'm there. I'm visible. Like, there's lessons to be learned every day, interacting with kids and how to be effective communicator with children, and takes time and all that. So people to the listeners out there, like, you guys are masters in something. Trust me. Like, it might not, you know, I've helped people build resumes when I was in college, and because when I went back to school, I was a couple years older, so I had my head on straight, meaning I need a resume, because then the whole purpose of going to school is to get work. And so these students would ask me, like, hey, how do I build this resume? And it's like, I'm not good at anything, so what do I write? I'm like, wow, that's not true. You are really exceptional at something because you have interest. So if you are uniquely capable of talking about something deeply that other people are not, that's a skill right there. You know, that's number one. Number two is realizing that two different worlds, they might be extremely different, but you get one place to the other through like a spaceship or whatever, you know, and that spaceship will be relevant here to here, right? So to me, the spaceship is called lessons, and you have to extrapolate lessons to understand what you are good at and what made you that good, and what additional work needs to happen. And you parlay that to the next phase, and then you're going to be able to approach that in not this feeling of, fuck, this is completely new, I'm super scared. You know, I try to find a relevancy in everything, so I can continue to use the skills that I've built over time. You know, I think there is such thing as working on your weaknesses, but there's sometimes where you got to just put that to the side and focus on your strengths. But none of those will ever be identified unless if you learned something before through the skills that you've acquired. So like in your situation, I don't know if it's as conscious as it sounds right now, but you know, the lessons you learned in cooking to approaching jiu-jitsu seems very, very closely interlinked.
Yeah, they are. You know, I go back to my early days of cooking too, where let's take like knife skills, for example.
Yeah.
Learning how to cut vegetables the right way or protein the right way. And, you know, really having that knife be an extension of you, which is the level you need to get at if you're going to work professionally. You know, when I first started with basic knife skills, you know, this was a restaurant that I worked at as a like a salad and panini cook before I went to culinary school. And, you know, I thought I was getting so good with my knife skills. And I got to culinary school and I was like, okay, cut this in a brunoise. I like this carrot in a brunoise. And for anyone out there that doesn't know what a brunoise is, it's basically 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch square or cube. That's tiny. I mean, we're talking like the size of a BB or like an airsoft pellet. But
what would be a typical dish? What would be a typical dish that uses a brunoise?
A lot of the classic French recipes will have knife cuts like that, and it's really it's more for presentation, to be honest.
Yeah.
But, you know, point being,
Yeah.
When I first went in to learn how to cut a brunoise, and like I, for the life of me, could not get it perfect. And if you didn't get it perfect, you basically failed the task.
Wow.
So, trial by fire, in the sense of you think you're good at something, but when you try to get to the next level, you realize that you're not. And it's so critically important to think about each step, like where you started and where you end at the end of that step. Like always be looking back, because that's what's going to help you get to that next phase. Like you got to remember where you started. It's because it's otherwise you're going to get disgruntled and give up, because you're not looking at progress in that way, in that kind of measured way, that incremental and measured mindset.
It's this is why you're further proving to me that cooking is a great example, comparable to jiu-jitsu, because like at the most macro level, we're not putting hands on each other in cooking or anything like that. We're not choking people out, tapping people out. There's none of that, which is unique to jiu-jitsu. But what it is you're just talked about knife skills, right? And knife skills is a component of realistically a small component of all the different components of skill to be a proficient chef, and in jiu-jitsu it's the same way. It's an incremental progress, right? So like just learning how to shrimp properly and all the different ways to shrimp: forward, backward, sideways, upright, like upside down. Like there's so many different ways to move the hip, and it takes time to the point where you should spend time just learning the mechanics of the hip, what's possible, practicing and all that, as it's equivalent of like practicing like breaking down an onion 4 different ways or whatever like that. Even though you're not actually making a dish, you're not actually sparring, but you are improving, and you almost need to do that to be able to actually execute that final thing. So it's really cool that in cooking, there's so many components. It's similar to jiu-jitsu. There's a million components. It's just I don't know if people realize that it's not just this gross progress. Sometimes to progress overall, you have to take a step back and progress tiny pieces of your game,
Yeah. What's interesting too is that one thing that you said a little bit ago, which was, I bet some of the really good chefs out there, they probably don't remember their first day and so forth. The good chefs that don't consistently perform, like they become a quick trend and then, they're done. You're right. But every really good chef, like look at Thomas Keller, for example.
Yeah.
Or Jose Andres. Any really good chef that's just, built that foundation. They all remember their early days, like washing dishes, peeling potatoes, peeling carrots, doing one task over and over and over again until they were perfect. They found new ways to be more efficient at it. That's what they did. That's how they became masters of their craft, was by focusing on the very basics and doing it over and over and over again until they were perfect at it. Not only that, but again, until they found better ways to be doing it, more efficient ways. Like, how can I do my task in half the time so that I can do something maybe a little bit more creative? Mm-hmm. And that I think that's directly translatable to any mastery of any skill, martial arts, jiu-jitsu, cooking, anything. Mm-hmm. Learn the fundamentals first. Master those fundamentals. That's your foundation. You can't build a big, skyscraper building without a really solid foundation.
It's interesting. Like I think about jiu-jitsu, and like that definitely, me coming up, foundations was everything. Nowadays, there's some newer instruction styles that say, why do we need fundamentals? Why don't we just do something more advanced? And then they're just ahead now, Mm-hmm. And I'm more of I see both sides. I try to keep an open mind. I see both sides, but the way I came up is like fundamentals. Like for instance, like there are these certain positions in jiu-jitsu that are like newer, specialized positions, and there's two ways to approach it. You either have insanely sick fundamentals to where anything new, you might not have been exposed to it, but you have an idea of how you should navigate and it gets you by. And then there's other people that may not have sick fundamentals and they just get creamed by this new position. And then what they do is they start finding defenses specifically to that scenario. And in my opinion, although they're both effective or can be, I think fundamentals just inherently give you like this bulletproof armor versus a specialized tool, you know. And I see that in Thomas Keller, like you're saying, like Jose Andres and stuff. Like these guys are the creativity, they have insane creativity, but their ability to execute is based on their fundamentals and stuff like that, you know. Like I think about, you know, I'm not a chef. I have not had training in that and all that, but I know that there's famous chefs out there. Like for instance, like there's Thomas Keller, and he's extremely respected, and he could walk down a hall. I ran into him in Vegas one time at the Venetian. You know, I wanted to go to his restaurant there, and he was suited up. He was in an elevator, and I just like, oh fuck, that's Thomas Keller. What's up, boy? What's up, dude? And then he was like, oh, okay, what's going on? He had a whole crew of people around him. You know, they're all his chefs and stuff. I was like, that's the one. But then there's other people that gain that same type of notoriety, but they did it in a different way. For instance, like I was just trying to think of someone, but like Eddie Huang, he got his real name built off of his bao house in New York, and he specializes in baos, right? And his creativity is in the world of baos. And I'm sure he has other restaurants that we just don't know he owns, but you know, he's not a guy who went through years and decades of building those fundamentals of cooking, and you put him in any restaurant environment and he will be able to come up with something like thought-provoking and pushing stuff. He built his restaurant empire essentially off of his personality and some good eats, and then that's what it is. But Thomas Keller, he's transcended a lot of other high-level chefs because he has that wide breadth of and deep knowledge of cooking and all this other stuff.
Yeah, three thoughts there. First, I would have paid good money to be there when you said that to Thomas Keller.
Yeah.
Just to see his reaction.
Oh, he didn't take it good.
2, no more talk about bao buns because I have not eaten lunch yet, and that sounds fucking amazing.
I know baos. I love bao buns, dude.
But 3, and here's like the actual thought that I wanted to get to, which was, you know, looking at fundamentals. You know, first off, there's certainly tons of different types of learners out there. Like some people might catch on quicker to the details versus other people. But in my experience, I've always found that developing those fundamentals is critical. But the reason I think that's so important is not because your active mind is using those fundamentals per se. It's because you're doing the fundamentals to the point where it becomes subconscious, where it becomes instinct. That's where you really want to get to, so that you're not using brain power trying to figure out how to do something the right way. That should be fundamental. Knife skills are that way. You know, cooking meat or developing, like training your taste buds to be able to season a dish properly. Those things are fundamental skills that you want to do them so many times that you don't have to use brain power, active brain power, to execute on those when you're in the fire. You know, you need to be able to use that sharp, detailed component of your mind in those scenarios where fundamentals should just be instinct. And that's why I always try to focus in on the fundamentals first, because I need them to become instinct. I need that. Yeah. I need to be able to use my brain to learn other things. You know, I need to make some room in my internal hard drive up here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to also like add a little bit of add the visual of what fundamentals can do for people, which is when I think you would sort of agree. Hear me out here on fundamentals is everything. It's so important. But fundamentals and us talking about fundamentals and us saying the importance of fundamentals, do not get it twisted. Fundamentals is not something that we're not saying every movement, everything should look like a fundamental movement or anything like that. You know, I have done fundamentals since I was little, because to make shit work against someone much bigger, older than you, when I was 14, it had to be fundamental shit. You know what I mean? And even within fundamentals, there's things that I wouldn't agree with or I really love. So fundamentals isn't this catch-all thing that's like, you're going to use all of this, bro. That's not true. And and the second part of that is like me, when I think about the way I like to spar with guys that are much lower in experience than me and people that are same level or above, fundamentals has a role in this overarching thing of results. And so I've tricked so many lower experienced people by breaking the rules of fundamentals and to be able to get what I want. So fundamentals is important, but don't get it twisted. It's not actual something that you would execute on a daily basis. Thomas Keller is not breaking down vegetables every day. He's just not. He has people in his payroll that does that for him. Thomas Keller is not moving boxes from the supplier into the kitchen. Like, he's not doing fundamental stuff. Like we talked about before, in a sushi chef, a sushi master will make his guys build on rice, and he'll be doing that for years, and then he can touch the egg, and then, you know, like I dream of sushi type stuff. But that dude, that master, is more about managing people and the fundamentals of the movement that they're doing, that he can mentor them and guide them, but he's not actually doing those things. So like when it comes to jiu-jitsu, I can teach a fundamental technique, but I'm taking bits and pieces of it to make it more advanced. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, 100%. But that's not to say that you couldn't execute upon the fundamentals if you needed to, which, you know, at your level, like even if you're not focusing on fundamentals every single day, you can still have that in your recall, and you know you're still a master at it because you took the time to nurture that and until it became instinct.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like all I'm trying to say is that when people talk about fundamentals in general, I'm just trying to translate what that actually means in a real life situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like fundamentals gets us somewhere, but at that moment in time where we're there already, we can pick and choose what fundamentals or what not fundamentals to use. You know what I'm saying? So I just want to like decipher that, because one of the things that I wanted when I was when I was a white belt, and I'm hearing purple belts, brown belts, black belts say, "Oh, bro, focus on the fundamentals," or they say, "Oh, I'm thinking you got to think 5 steps ahead." Like when I hear those things, I'm taking it literally. Like, oh, black belt saying focus on fundamentals. He must be really sick at fundamentals. He must use fundamentals all the time. There's a difference between what the black belt is imagining when he says those words versus what a white belt's imagining when they hear those words. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I'm now wondering though, what if the level of what fundamentals is changes or increases as you move yourself up the ranks? Like, for example, as a white belt, you know, shrimping, fundamental. But as a black belt, maybe what you would consider fundamentals, maybe something that's totally way too advanced for a white belt. Maybe your level of fundamentals is just different, but the fundamentals still exist. They're just at a higher level.
I completely, you're onto something. That's real, because and this is required. This is why mentorship and guidance is required. This is why people who do jiu-jitsu without a coach they're in a really rough situation. I'm not saying it's impossible, but a mentor helps a lot, especially in cooking. Like, you can't have a bunch of dudes who want to cook let loose in a kitchen and then give them 3 years and then they're going to be amazing. You know what I'm saying? Like, they need mentorship. And so and again, mentorship isn't someone who like calls you up because you missed your class or anything like that. Mentorship is like, if you have a question, you have someone to go to and they can help navigate you through that question, you know? So let me put that into context, like a real life scenario. If I was a white belt asking a black belt, hey, what are the fundamentals I need to focus on right now? A black belt will tell the white belt, hey, don't worry about submissions right now. Worry about defense, escaping, fundamental movements. And they're like, all right, fundamental movements. All right, shrimping, forward rolls. Okay, that makes sense. If I was a black belt and I go to my Milton black belt, right? And then we're preparing for, I don't know, he just saw me spar with someone, another black belt, and I did all right. But there were things that he wanted to tell me about, you know? I would go sit with him and he would be like, look, you got to realize you're playing in a different league now. I remember when I was a brown belt, he actually said something like, you know, you're on a new level, and then the fundamentals of this level is X, Y, and Z, right? And I was like,
that's it.
Oh shit. Okay, got you. Cause so fundamentals all the way to brown, I was like, that shrimping shit, that's fundamentals. I'm on this berimbolo tip, you know, I'm trying to learn this new stuff, 50-50, all that. And then he says, no, when you go get someone that's at your level or above, the number one thing you need to realize is it's a slower game. Things are more strict now. You have to have more discipline. You have to time your things. And you know, the idea of there's a beginning and an end of a technique. Like I'm in full guard, I want to do scissor sweep. There's a beginning and end, ends and out. But he said that like that's fundamental shit. That's just very simple stuff. But he was like, there's a beginning and end, but doesn't the success of the technique doesn't rely on you getting to that end. The success is what actually happens. So break your mind out of it. That's a fundamental thing you need to know. And I was like, fuck. That's what's up. So as your skill increases, the definition of what's fundamental to you will change. And you're 100% right on that. You killed it with that one.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting too, to think about when, let's say you're at a specific level. I mean, just like jiu-jitsu, cooking has its own hierarchy of rank almost. Really what it is just demonstrating like the skill level that you've earned at that point. But without, you know, that's a tangent right there.
Okay.
My point is that when you graduate to different levels, you're not necessarily forgetting the fundamentals from the level before, but you're basically putting them out of mind. Because if let's say the fundamentals that I learned as a prep cook, at the very low end of the totem pole, let's say I mastered those fundamentals. Years later, I now become executive chef. The fundamentals for an executive chef are vastly different. You know, you got things like business to worry about, food cost, all that stuff. Those fundamentals that I learned as a prep cook are still available to me as recall. I don't practice them because I've mastered them and I put them out of mind, but they're there if I need it. I can pull them out of my instinct bank if I need to. And that's a really key point to mastering anything, let alone, martial art, jiu-jitsu, cooking. I think that's a key element of the process of mastery itself.
That is really interesting. You actually I put myself in the position of the jiu-jitsu guy, and as you increase your skill level, you're also in different positions, and not only forget the position. As you increase in skill level and experience, you start to focus on different things, right? And your new focus, there are fundamentals and advanced within that focus. And I think that's what we're trying to get at is like, for me, I was just thinking about it. When I was a white belt, I distinctly remember thinking, fuck, what do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? What was that? What was that? I was so reactive, right? So to me, fundamentals was putting yourself in positions where you can have a little bit of more breathing room. So for instance, like instead of scrambling with another spazzy white belt, I put him in full guard. Then I think about what to do, right? Like shit like that. But now I think reflect on like the roles that I do with people. It's like, it's not even about what do I do now, because I already have that. So I don't actually think about that anymore. What I think about is who's pushing, who's pulling. It's like, I would have never thought about pushing and pulling as a white belt because I just don't know what that means. But as a black belt now, like when I'm pushing, I'm talking about who's the one on the defensive, who's the one on the offensive. That to me is a bigger component of me focusing on that will contribute to my success than how I do that. Like the how is already thought out, like the techniques and all this other stuff, the going to this side, underhooking this way, whatever. Those are not even in my mind. I'm more focused on, I need to continue whatever. I need to pull out something that will allow me to continue to push forward and then being on the back step. You know what I mean? So the perspective is different.
Yeah. I mean, there's different layers to fundamentals and mastery.
Yeah.
And like I said, man, I think that's totally translatable to multiple different facets of life. Like,
I think that's
job
it.
that you come into, like finance, for example. I'm sure you went through something similar with finance where you had to actually master the very basic elements of using Excel, or, you know, what a P&L sheet is.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and then the main thing is like, the whole purpose of this podcast is just enlightening people that you are probably skilled at something, and then you need to be conscious of the lessons you learned there, because those lessons can be moved to all their areas of your life, right? And when it comes to a third area, so we talked about jiu-jitsu, we talked about cooking, and now it's like, for me, my personal career in finance is like, there was a point in time where I was trying to understand what the hell a function is on Excel. Like, how do I sum numbers up, bro? Like, I'm in college, you know? And then now I'm at the point where those fundamental things are not necessarily something I think about anymore. It's just thinking about what is the end result of the Excel sheet I want to create. What's the visual? Yep. What's the data? Okay, now I employ all this. I'm not even thinking about the function. I'm just like, okay, the size of the cell is a little bit too big. Let me just adjust that, and this is how I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, absolutely.
That's right. You're not even thinking about it. I mean, like those words specifically that you just said, that's totally the essence of what we're talking about here. You're not even thinking about it.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny because another area is like a few years ago when I was interning at eBay during the summer, I fell in love with trap shooting. You know, like you go to an open field gun range, you have a shotgun, and then there's, you know.
Yeah, we should go sometime.
I'm down. They shoot clays and stuff. There was a moment in time in that summer where I was so addicted to it, right? And what was so interesting is that you do it and it's fun. Like, you can literally be like, here are the safety rules. Just try to hit the motherfuckers. Like, let's do it. And then you might be able to actually hit a few. And then as you enjoy it and you want to pursue it further and get those numbers up, you start looking at YouTube on techniques, and you ask your buddies, like, how do I hold, and what is the appropriate like choke for this rifle or for this shotgun and all that. And then you start to realize your numbers start to go down. And then as you hone in those fundamentals, the numbers will come back up, because now you're actually building. You're not just employing fundamentals without understanding what they're for. You're employing the fundamentals, and then you're past the point of being awkward, and now you actually go back up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, do you think that's possibly the case with some people who want to get into jiu-jitsu but maybe have a wrestling background, where they have to basically unlearn some of the fundamentals that they learned during wrestling to relearn the jiu-jitsu, the fundamentals that are key to jiu-jitsu? I mean, like, I feel like generally speaking, they're both forms of grappling, if you will, but the set of fundamentals and the rules, the actual art itself, they're very different. So would that be a similar case, like of what you just talked about, like where your skill level is going to appear to come down because you're unlearning the fundamentals that are no longer useful in this particular task or skill. You're relearning the appropriate ones that are going to help you get further.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. Oh my God. But here's the thing, is if that happens, if you're doing it right, if you're approaching the game correctly, that is how it should go down. Now, let me try to full circle this. We talked about how humility and realizing that if you're pursuing growth in something is the same as pursuing something new, because every time you grow, it's something new. You know what I mean? You're on a different plane. You're on a different perspective. You're on different skills. You're on different people, different tasks, different responsibilities within that task. And so which is another conversation I would like to have with you, which is learning a lot of different things versus learning really good at one thing. I think that would be a topic that would be really fun to explore.
All right.
But when it comes to wrestlers, that's what I'm talking about. If you didn't approach wrestling as a martial art, and you just talked about like, let's just, I wrestled in high school, and we were really highly ranked in California. And then the thing that they said was push, explode, fuck your feelings. You know what I mean? Like, just fucking get the job done. Right. So when it was season and we're getting ready for state nationals or states and nationals, there was no thinking. It was just like, yo, if you are not leaving unless you do 500 double legs and like 300 sprawls. Like we're just getting those reps in, bro. You know what I mean?
Yep.
There was no real deep thinking in that. Now, regarding the question, it's like, if everything's done right, a wrestler is going to have success right away because they're employing all the skills that they learned in the past. But here's the thing. Long term, there's that ego, and there's a bit of ego in there to expect 100% of your skills in wrestling to transfer over into jiu-jitsu. You will have success, which fuels that ego. But don't fall into that novelty, because over time, you will progress slower than the people that didn't have those skills coming into jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. No, I think it has a lot to do with how you're able to actually take the skills that might be valuable from wrestling to jiu-jitsu and bridging, like actually making those connections. If you don't make those connections, you're unlearning everything and relearning everything. But if you're able to take, find the connections between what's useful and what's not as you go, I think that's a recipe for success.
I completely agree with you, and that it takes someone with ego and a conscious perspective. You feel me? Like, there's so many people that do jiu-jitsu and they don't even see it as a martial art. They call it a sport. And I'm like, okay, yeah, there is a sports side to this. It's huge, but you're missing an opportunity to walk away from class with more in your pocket than just calling it a sport. Because if you call it a sport, you're working hard and you're building up and you're getting better than ever. Like, you're beating people that you shouldn't. Like that, but that doesn't mean that like jiu-jitsu is like you're getting the most out of jiu-jitsu. Like, to me, it was always about, in the beginning it was about, and it still is, like, I want to improve and I want to beat people I shouldn't. But at the same time, like, at what cost? You know what I mean? So you have to really approach the game and what you really want in a very conscious way so you can actually hit those goals,
Yeah. And the more I think about it, like, if we think about those who come in thinking that it's just a sport, with any sport, while you say that, yeah, there is a sport aspect to it, there's competition. I think, at least for me, the more elaborate way to think about it is, with a sport, you actually reach a destination. You're hitting a point of victory or loss. Like, let's say you win the state championship in wrestling, and now you're you feel like you can sit back on your heels a little bit because I'm the state champion, and it fills your ego up a little bit. You feel like you've actually reached the destination, which for some people could make them feel like they could hit the brakes. But the way that I like to think about it, and this is how I think about cooking too, is the journey is the destination. You're not doing it to reach an end goal. You're doing it to continuously improve, learn, better yourself. I think that a lot of people miss that too. With anything, is that they'll get to this destination that they've been working towards and then they stop. I think that certainly goes back to like the episode that you did on why people quit after blue belt.
Yeah.
Once you reach a destination, some people feel like, oh, I don't need to keep going because I've reached this destination. But the journey is the destination.
Wow. You hit it on the head there, because, in that podcast with Rich was trying to figure out what his ultimate goal was, and without like judging or anything like that, hear him out. And then, because depending on the reason, you can have a good reason or you can have a dumb reason. And like someone who's been there, done that can help you navigate what is what. Mm-hmm. And he had a combination of things. So like I was trying to help him through that, but you're right. Like the truth is, the actual journey is it, like for one, but here's the thing. Yeah, it's good to have goals 100%, but also understand that the pursuit of doing something sometimes is just, you can just have a great time doing that. Like, for instance, if your goal is, I want to win the Mundials, like I want to win the world championships, no one's saying that's a stupid goal. Like, go do it. But because like even regular people who don't compete, even if they had that goal, at least the reality of them hitting that goal is really tough. So essentially guarantees they're going to be training for a long time. You know what I mean? So as long as you're training, that's good. But here's the thing. If your goal is to learn and your goal is to become a better person, you're gonna have, there's not gonna have this like, oh shit moment of, fuck, I got my blue belt, now what? You know what I mean? Like the blue belt will come. Like in that podcast, I told him like my goal when I started jiu-jitsu was black belt. So every time I got a blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, I was like, all right, next up, let's go. What's next? Immediately. It wasn't, let me savor this. Oh my God, what happened? No, it was like, all right, I expected this. Let's keep it going. And so, but now at black belt, this is where all the lessons come in. Now at black belt, you know, I had this really oh shit moment. It was like, I remember telling a homie was like, I don't know what's going to happen when I get that black belt on my waist, because I've had it as a goal for over a decade. It was like, it took me 14 years to get black belt. So I was like, I don't know what happens when I get it. Like, am I just going to lose the love of jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
And I had to really like think about that. And then, so it's worth noting, like, this is what happens. So like, depending on your expectation, depending on what really is important to you, depending on like how you could fit this in your life, there's all these like variables that people need to think about before they just set off a goal in jiu-jitsu. And this goes for the same for everything, right? If your goal, if your culinary goal was, I want to be Thomas Keller, or it was, I want to graduate that culinary school, how you feel after that first event is going to be vastly different depending on those two perspectives. You feel me?
Yeah. You know, some people do get to a higher level and then they do drop out. It certainly happens, but once you get to that level, like once you've been doing it for so long, I feel like like you said, your mentality around it has changed. You're not necessarily going after a goal. You're continuing it because it's a part of you now. Like it's a deep enough part of you now that it's no factor. You're just going to keep doing it to keep learning. But when you reach that sort of middle level, and you know, like I for one stopped being a professional chef to get into tech and other things, but the lessons that I learned from cooking, and learning to become a chef to a certain level, I've used for years. Like I haven't cooked in a professional kitchen in probably a decade now. But every day I still draw from that experience. From, you know, a mental capacity standpoint, I am remarkably calm under pressure at work. Like if somebody is grilling me about something, I can keep that clear head and quiet the monkey mind. So point is, like, even if you do stop, like those lessons don't go away. Like if you were to quit jiu-jitsu right now, the rest of your life, you'd still be able to draw off of the process of becoming a black belt, the lessons that you learned and all that. Not to say that people should quit jiu-jitsu. They shouldn't.
No, and I get it. It's just like, I think this is something that I think about all the time regarding like everything I do, which is there's never a black and white answer to it all. You know what I mean? Like what you hear and what you imagine in your own head is generally wrong especially the first time you hear something. And other times, like even if you're wrong, it's the right answer at the moment, you know? So it's so complicated when you think about it that way. So it's just, there's a lot going on. It's just when it comes to that perspective of like where your head's at, your goal setting and all that stuff, to me, it's like, as much as I've heard that statement, like the journey is the destination, the journey is the thing. I do a mix of both, because I am goal oriented person for sure. Like I see something and I'm like, I want to do that thing, whatever it takes. And I need that to be able to actually execute the steps to get there. But at the same time, I also have a tendency to get lost in that. And then like the steps is just dominoes that I need to like pull down, and I need to just keep it moving. Like I don't put significance on those things, but you know, as instructor, as a teacher now, like I'm more seeing the power of, hey bro, like if someone comes to me frustrated, it's like, oh, I'm not making the progress that I want to, blah, blah, blah. I don't even, I would ask them what their actual full goal is, and then like just push them on that idea. It's like, what is your goal anyway? Like, are you trying to get better, or are you trying to beat that guy? It's like, what if I told you you could beat that guy without getting better? And it's like, no, I chose him as a rival because if I could beat him, then that means I'm getting better. It's like, what if I introduce the concept of beating that one guy doesn't mean you're getting better? What if that's the case? And they're like, shit, then I would have to change my goals. And so I run into this all the time, like, especially I can speak from my own personal experience, and I still make these issues. It's like, I have a goal, but I don't really, I need someone there to help me walk through it, to learn, to like sort of A/B test it. Like, let's say you hit that goal and this happens, or let's say you don't hit that goal and this happens. How would you feel? And it's like, damn, you're right. So like, should we reevaluate that goal? And it's like, yeah, we probably should. And so it gets complicated, but I hope people realize that it gets complicated and that it's just not just black and white.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think setting goals is a really good tactic for, you know, the continuous process and you know, to reach next levels. But at the end of the day, like, you always got to remember your why. Like, why did I start this? Why did I start doing this? Is that still relevant to me? If not, what's relevant to me now?
Yeah.
You know, I think those are important questions that everyone should ask when starting a new skill, especially jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Jiu-jitsu to me, like, I don't know, my progression was this. It was like, I came in wanting to protect myself, learning how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Once you start to realize, like, for me, I tested what I learned in class. Like, I was in a unique environment where I can pick a fight with whoever I wanted. I could literally go to a 7-Eleven and like just stare at someone, and then it's a fight right there. You know what I mean? Like, I grew up in Compton, so like there's a lot of, like, I grew up with Latinos and shit, Hispanics, and like full of love, but full of like moxie. You feel me? Like, you could look at someone the wrong way, and then they'll stop the car, get out of the car, and we're fighting right there. So for me, I was in a unique position where, as I learned more, I realized the effectiveness you need to win a fight is fairly low, and because you don't need a black belt to defend yourself. What you need is 9 months of jiu-jitsu, and you should not be scared to walk into anywhere. And and that 9 months, it changes if you're smaller, if you're bigger, if you're male, female, like, you know, it changes, but it's around that time. You don't even have to get to blue belt to be able to have that confidence. You know what I'm saying? On the street.
Totally.
Yeah. So what does that mean? It means my goals changed over time. And then for me, like, what initially got me in the door is not what kept me in the door. Like, those goals change over time. And for me, I was like, once I realized that this is a riddle that I want to solve, because the prize at the end was enlightenment, was a major game changer for me. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. So I think you touched on one topic that I kind of want to do as our next episode, which is the ability and the confidence to you know, handle yourself in a fight if you need to. And that we should bring Etzel on.
Yeah, I agree. Etzel has an MMA fight, so
Let's do it.
He has like professional experience with it. Like, and for me, I fought for money before, but it was literally like house parties, people are drinking, and I fought like 8 dudes in a night, and then I get my rent paid. You know what I mean? Like, I've done shit like that mainly because I knew I could. You know what I mean?
That's
like,
wild.
Yeah, so I have we absolutely, like, we can get into that. I'm down. Like, I wrote it down in our outline here, so we can
let's
go back into it.
All right, well, that's our next episode then.
Yeah, like, have you,
and
just curious, have you gotten into any fights?
Not recently.
All right.
No, like, this is like way back post high school. My first go around at college didn't make it through, but it I've been in a few that were a little scrappy and drunk, fueled by alcohol.
Yeah. Well, we can save that on another topic. Now, what I want to do now is, I don't know. I just had like literally a handful of like questions regarding like your past experience as a cook, as a chef, and all that stuff. Like, I want to ask you a couple questions based on your expertise, which is, do you have a favorite restaurant in your life, like, that you've ever stopped by? A favorite one, like, without a doubt, so clear in your mind. And if it's not, I want the top 2. But if there's one shining light, I want to know what that is.
Oh man. I think it's like hitting a moving target.
Yeah,
First off,
for sure.
because it changes all the time. It depends on, where I'm at in my life, what places I actually go to. But I think for me, number one is probably Atelier Cren in San Francisco.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard of them.
It's amazing. The head chef, Dominique Cren, she I think, she's got 3 Michelin stars now. Was the first woman to get 2 Michelin stars in the United States, and now I think is the first to get 3. But anyway, it's beautiful. So you walk in, there's no decor really. It's very basic but nice.
And this is located in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You get this little piece of paper put in front of you, and it's a poem.
Yeah.
It's about like 20 to 30 lines. Each line of the poem describes the dish you're about to get. There's no menu, no nothing. And it's all fixed. You just pay one price, and they just start bringing things out. It's a wild experience.
It's that reminds me of my first 3-star Michelin experience was Per Se in New York, Thomas Keller's place. Yeah. And, at the time I was just visiting New York, and I hear about Thomas Keller because French Laundry in Yountville, I think is where they're at. They're in the wine area of Northern California. And I always heard about Thomas Keller, and I've seen Thomas Keller on Anthony Bourdain's show. They're good buds, and I go to Per Se, and my number one thing was, how much is this? And number 2 was, am I going to get full? Those are my 2 major things, right? And honestly, I felt like it was great value. It was an experience that I wouldn't try to do all the time, but I walked out of there stuffed. You feel me? So for sure. For Creme, I've seen her episode on Chef's Table, and it seems very light, and it seems very I want to say the word, it's almost ethereal, because the way she presents the flavors as a visual as you read them, and then you go into the food. What was what was the most mind-blowing thing about that experience?
It's funny, you go through all these fancy dishes and whatever.
Yeah.
The standout thing were the fresh brioche buns, served with beef butter.
Wow.
And it's just that's one thing I'll never forget about this place. And you're right. It's a very ethereal experience. Every course is amazing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And yes, you do get full.
Awesome. Yeah.
at Atelier Cren, but the just the simplicity and perfection of the roll.
Wow.
These brioche buns, these little rolls, most people think of them as they're just an afterthought. You get bread and butter on the table, whatever. These were so good. And you can tell that somebody back there put absolutely everything they had into even though it's super simple, they put everything they had into it, and it made it so delicious.
Yo, okay, that's awesome. That's so funny, because you have your experience level, right? And I know for a fact you enjoy all types of food. You're not a snob. You're not, you know what I mean? We've talked about Korean barbecue, and Korean barbecue isn't some exquisite culinary experience. It's just good flavors and good texture, smells, all that stuff. And so I know that you appreciate all different levels, and you have deep skill in cooking, more so than the average person, definitely. But what's funny is you can identify the uniquely bomb ass dish as that brioche. You know what I mean? That's so funny. Out of everything that you ate that day, you pointed to bread, and I'm like, okay, that's awesome. That's if I asked that sushi chef that question, that they're not gonna say, oh, chutoro, duh. No, they're gonna say, dude, this particular rice in this prefecture of Japan, or the way that they take care of it, and the way that's my favorite. You know what I mean? So it's really cool.
So here, what tamago is?
Of course, my favorite.
Yeah,
my
egg.
favorite. Yeah, dude.
So it's funny. Some sushi places, I don't remember where I heard this, but I remember the tamago just being the simplest thing, but done to absolute perfection.
Yeah.
At this one place, And it's weird because you never think like, you know, at a sushi place, oh, that's going to be the star of the show. When you have all these great species of fish aged to the perfect, you know, the perfect level of umami. And it's the tamago, it's the egg that's the star of the dish, because it's done so perfectly, because the fundamentals are executed upon so perfectly that it just makes all the difference. Like you can tell that it's the best thing on the menu.
It's interesting because it's so high level, but they need to have good fundamentals or else they won't. Because you know, an egg there's a very sharp tip of perfect and then not good or underdone or whatever, right? So it's like,
oh, I know.
It's interesting because the first time I ever heard this was the Anthony Bourdain talked about in his show, is like, if there's a chef that we want to test, we're gonna have him make an omelet.
Yep.
Like simple as that. French omelet. Just, I don't even need to talk to you. I just need to see what you can produce. And if you can do it, we trust you. You know what I mean? And it's so funny.
French omelet is notoriously difficult to do.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like your normal omelet that you would just be cooking on a Saturday morning or whatever. So French omelet, you ever had one before?
I don't know if I had like a traditional French omelet.
All right. So the French omelet is, you have the pan on basically low heat and you're just mixing it with a spatula until it starts to curdle a little bit.
Yeah.
Once it starts to curdle, you turn the heat down and you put your toppings through the center. Usually it's a mixture of herbs and maybe
some type of cheese or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very, very simple. And anyway, at the perfect moment, the bottom layer has now cooked. It's coagulated. So there's basically a layer on the bottom that's coagulated egg, so that flat level. And then you have the top where it's a mixture of like curdle and creamy egg, like it's not fully cooked.
Yeah.
And the trick is to get it to that perfect consistency where it's not runny, but it's not totally solid in the center. And it's all about timing, completely, 100% about timing. And you basically fold it or roll it right off the pan onto the plate. And the perfect outcome is where it's, you know, it's this really sort of soft, smooth, velvety on the outside. And you cut into it and it's just slow ooze of like almost egg custard with the toppings. And it seems super simple, but so many people fuck it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm certainly one of them. I fucked it up for the longest time before I learned how to do it properly. And it's a real skill to have. And it's certainly a good test of, you know, whether or not a chef has focused on the fundamentals. And eggs are a perfect thing because again, eggs are so easy to fuck up.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. You know, it's so funny because I don't know, eggs is just life, dog. Like, you know what I mean? There's just so much you can do so much with. I'm sure someone can go like hours into egg and how it's so funny. My story is like, my name is Denney, right? And then, you know, I always grew up saying, yeah, Denney. Not people say Danny. It's like, no, Denney, like the restaurant, Denny. You know what I mean? And I asked my dad, I was like, what's up with Denney? He's like, am I really named after that restaurant? Like, what's good? And he's like, dude, when I first came to America, Denny, I would work all day and I was hungry, and Denny's would be the only one that's open like late, right? And so what I would do is I would go into a Denny's late at night, and I knew the waiter, she knew me, everything was good. Like it was like I would have conversations. That's how I would build my like vocabulary for English. And one of the ways that I would do it is I would ask them all the different types of ways that you can have egg, and he would ask for that, right? So he was like over easy, over sunny side up, over medium, scrambled, you know, like fried. Like he would ask for all this stuff, and that experience helped him like integrate into America and all that. So he was just like, man, I'm gonna give respects to Denny's, and then like name you after that shit. I'm like, all right, fuck it. That's an interesting name. And then the second part of that is I found out there's an extra E at the end of my name. And then I was like, what's up with that? What happened to the Denny store? Is that for real now? Were you fucking with me? And he was like, oh, you were born in Korea. So like, we didn't know how to, like the nurse or something didn't know how to spell your name correct or something like that. I'm like, isn't that something you write? I don't know. I'm just going to leave it here. Fuck it. The Denny store is a good one, you know?
It is good. At least you have a backstory to your name, you know?
Yeah. Uh, uh, yeah. So, okay. So we went over your favorite restaurant. We went over that. Okay. So how about this? Is there any? Is there any? I don't know how to phrase this, but like there are famous chefs out there that have a consortium of restaurants under their name, whether they're involved in it or not. You know, maybe by name, by brand, or whatever. But is there any chefs out there like that are known in the cooking world that you just think is overrated?
Guy Fieri.
Interesting. Dude, I love Guy because I love his show, but I've never, he has restaurants, Johnny Garlics and stuff. I don't, I would want to eat there as a novelty, as like a curiosity, but I don't know. Like I'll tell you what, when he eats food, he does a great job breaking it down. One of my biggest pet peeves is people who have eating shows and they can't explain the food. It's like, you can tell when someone's critiquing food, but you can tell they never cooked. It's like a big pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, that's why I like Elton Brown, because he actually knows the science and stuff behind it.
Probably the most.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, overrated. I'd have to put some thought into that one, but he's definitely the first one that comes to mind. You will not catch me at Flavortown.
Yeah, that's so funny. His show, Diners, Drive-Ins, is probably my favorite show. I love his show because it's not about him. It's about him giving a platform for people that deserve it. And
100%.
There's not a lot of shows out there that do that. And so I appreciate that out of him. And also I heard that one like in the past, like there was a kid in his town. So he lives in like Northern California somewhere, like Roseville or something like that. There was a kid in his town that climbed his roof, his garage, snuck in and stole his Lamborghini and like was being chased by cops, right? And then apparently the story goes like that someone close to the situation called Guy and then was like, someone stole your car, your Lambo. And he was like, oh shit, what is this? Like, it's like some 16-year-old kid. It's like the kid from the neighborhood. And he's like, I'll let him drive it. Fuck it. You know what I mean? And then like, I don't know if he dropped the charge or something, but I was like, that's a guy who has no ego. He knows how to have fun. Fuck that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. So how about this? Okay. So favorite restaurant, overrated chef. How about, what is an underrated chef that I should know about, but like most people don't, because I'm always looking for people that are extremely talented and like, but a lot of chefs, they're either big personality or they're the most low key. You don't even know they cook,
Yeah. I'm sure some people probably will recognize his name. But Brian Voltaggio, he was on Top Chef a while ago. He actually lost to his brother, Michael Voltaggio, who's an LA chef.
Oh, but I think I know this.
Yeah, Brian, they both actually grew up probably about 30 minutes from where I grew up in Maryland. But Brian's got a restaurant, Volt. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I remember those guys on the show. They were so precise and measured. I remember that.
That's right. So, I mean, if you think about sort of how they differ, I mean, Michael, it was definitely more into the sort of the really sort of out there, not necessarily thinking about soul, but more thinking about technique. Whereas Brian, you can tell he's got that sort of like warmth, almost country soul. And Frederick, where they grew up, is definitely it's a little bit in the boonies, or at least it used to be when I grew up. I think it's a little bit more densely populated now. But anyway, like the fact that he uses venison, for example, venison is one of my favorite meats ever. And deer, anyone that's from Maryland can tell you, like deer around there are like pests. I mean, there's so many of them. Right. So to be using a meat that's locally sourced and really sustainable to like what what applies for that territory, that area, I think it's just it's sort of, you're not thinking just about the food, you're thinking about what your food's impact is outside of the restaurant too.
Yeah.
Which I always look for when I'm going to a new restaurant. Like, is it just that they have this like crazy technique and there's a lot of hype, or is it really well thought out food that also incorporates responsible sourcing and sort of goes that extra length to make sure that what they're doing sort of comes full circle.
I feel that. That's awesome. But that's what's up. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for my questions. Like I just wanted to pick your brain on like food world in general, because, you know, I am a fan of food. I love food. I love learning who the major players are. You know, I don't know as much because I don't own a TV anymore, but like, rather, I don't have cable or anything like that. Food Network was always my, like, it was Food Network that was my first plug, being plugged into the whole thing. But then the second was Bravo when they started doing Top Chef. I love that show so much because they really emphasize the challenge. You know, there's some stuff that are fabricated. Like, I'm sure they had time to understand what the ingredients were or the theme or something like that, because building a menu is very difficult. Like, I mean, I've never had to do it, but I just know how hard it is, you know, like people, and then some people just change the menu daily and shit. Like, that's crazy. Like a place in Italy where they have access to so much good produce and seafood and all that stuff. But I thought it was really cool because it just shows you the resourcefulness of people that have this experience, that have the skill and knowledge to be able to make something ultimately like that can be not just tasty, but judged on that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I love that shit.
For sure. Yeah, me too. All right. Well, speaking of food, it is lunchtime around here. So, and I can smell my wife made kimchi fried rice again. So,
oh shit.
I'm about to go after that.
Yeah, for real.
But anyway, I mean, this was a real fun conversation. I really enjoyed drawing parallels between, you know, various life experiences. So connecting the process of learning how to effectively cook and becoming a professional chef, and connecting that to starting a new skill like jiu-jitsu. And learning first the fundamentals, and then the process in which it becomes instinct. I mean, it just goes to show you that like that process itself is translatable to so many other things too. Like any new skill that you want to learn, you know, never rule it out, because everyone's got to start somewhere. It's got to be day one somewhere for somebody.
Yeah. That's so true. And it's like, so one of the things I want people that are listening to just focus on is that, like, think about the little touch points that we had that to me was a banger when it comes to my personal growth, which is goals change. You know, how you feel is based on your expectation. Nothing's black and white. Like the words that you hear from someone else, understand don't take those words to heart. Understand what's packaged in those words. And then realize what you want. I think the hardest thing is people don't really realize what they want. A lot of the things that they're doing is through the momentum of something that their parents made them do, or their friends are doing, and they want to be a part of that. Is like, are you doing that because you want to do that, or are you doing that because you want to be close to your friends? Like, just be honest, and whatever the answer is, it'll make you happier at the end of the day to have a goal that is true. And why is that important? It's because it's sustainable. If you're doing something for someone else, you're not going to last. And so when it comes to jiu-jitsu, and I learned about martial arts through jiu-jitsu, but as I learned more about martial arts, I'm not a person like philosophizing on what a martial artist is. I'm not that guy. But one thing that I realized over time, especially now as a full-time teacher, is that like it's complicated, and that martial arts and a martial art and a martial artist is not bound by certain rules. Like if you've done something hard and you learn something from it, like why is that not a martial art? Like why aren't the virtues of a martial artist not on that person that went through something super difficult? You know what I mean? It's the main thing is like, if there is something to be learned through difficult times, but it's something to be like talked about if you did something difficult for years and years and years and years, you know, like cooking, like doing jiu-jitsu, like being in the finance world, or being a doctor, or anything like that. You're really into
winemaking.
Winemaking. That's a martial art right there. You know what I mean? There's so much art and science, you know, anything that has those intersections is going to be, there's going to be a lot of lessons that person has that we can all feel excited about learning. You know what I mean? Like, this is one of the things in jiu-jitsu that people say is like, you can learn from a white belt. And I believe that, because the word white belt implies that this person trains, but it's like, they don't have to train. Like, if you think about it, if you don't train at all, you're pretty much a white belt. So like, you just didn't get it yet. you know? So I try to learn from everyone, and to hear your experience, like, and this is unprovoked. The thoughts that you said and the concept that you said, I learned it through jiu-jitsu too, you know? So it's awesome to know. What's interesting is to be going to be able to track your progress, see your progress, because while people are coming in, starting with zero, at least you have this other thing, that these motivations, these goals, these expectations that are better in tune with getting better at jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? What's that quote? What's that quote that you like? The Musashi quote?
Oh, I don't have it off the top of my
I
head.
know, right? So like, it's like once you get really good at one thing, you'll be able to get good at other things much easier, right? So that's the general gist of it. And I believe that that's real.
I mean, I think that sort of embodies exactly what we talked about today, which is the process of mastering something directly translates into mastering other things as well.
Yeah. The tragedy is that you might be in the process of mastering something, but you don't realize it. That's the tragedy. So guys, like, if you guys are asking yourself, like, I do jiu-jitsu and I didn't learn any of these lessons, or I'm not doing jiu-jitsu and I didn't learn any of these lessons, it's half the battle is being in the right position. So do jiu-jitsu, do something difficult. But the other half is realizing that you can learn lessons, that you can articulate these ideas because you're looking for these lessons. It just doesn't happen to you. You're actually looking for it. And when it does happen, you can identify that event just occurred, and then you can start to learn from it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's the main thing.
Yeah. I mean, anyone can really sort of think about, to your point, like, what's instinct for you? What do you consider instinct that you don't even think about with an active mind anymore, but you do it daily or you do it weekly or whatever? Think back to when you didn't do that, and what's the process that you took to get to the point now that you're not even thinking about it. You're just doing it.
That's real.
Anyway.
Yep. That's
good conversation, man. Until our next episode with Mr. Etzel.
I got to hit him up.
Yeah. We'll be back to you guys soon.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
And, thank you for listening. If you guys have questions or want to reach out, we have Instagram, Facebook. Is From the Dojo Podcast, you know, so DM me. If you're going to hit that, you're going to DM me. So any questions, topics, give us props, feedback, whatever, like, let us know so we can do more of this for you guys. I hope this helps. The main thing is, when I was first starting out, this is not the way I thought. So I'm hoping that, you know, with our experience in our fields, and then realizing that there's a connection, that people that are more upstream can sort of be clued in and find those connections sooner, you know? And so that means that you'll progress faster, and that's the key.
Amen.
Yeah.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any subject requests or just want to chat, feel free to reach out to Denney or I via DM through the Instagram handle @FromTheDojoPodcast, or via email at daniel@FromTheDojo.com, or Denney, that's Denney, @FromTheDojo.com. Looking forward to hearing from you.